most powerful military commander in the world. You have conquered nations, crossed the Rubicon, and made kings kneel. And yet somehow, a woman with no army, no allies, and a kingdom on the edge of collapse has made herself completely indispensable to you. Not through war, not through love alone, through money, through debt, through the oldest lever of power that has ever existed. This is not a love story. This is a masterclass in financial manipulation, and Cleopatra VII of Egypt wrote the book. To understand what Cleopatra did, you first need to understand how broken Egypt was before she ever met a Roman general. When Cleopatra came to power in 51 BC, Egypt was technically still a kingdom. It had the Nile, it had grain, it had gold, but it was drowning. Her father, Ptolemy XII, had spent years desperately bribing Roman officials just to keep Egypt off Rome's annexation list. The price of that survival was enormous. He borrowed over 6,000 talents of silver from a Roman banker named Rabirius Postumus. That is the equivalent of hundreds of millions of dollars in today's terms. Egypt was, in every practical sense, a client state that owed its existence to Roman goodwill and Roman credit. When Ptolemy died, he left Cleopatra a throne built on debt, a treasury weakened by years of payments, and a Rome that was watching very carefully. She was 21 years old. And then her own brother had her thrown out of the palace. She was exiled, stateless, technically powerless. Most rulers in that position fade into history as a footnote. Cleopatra looked at the situation differently. She didn't ask how she could take her kingdom back by force. She asked something far more dangerous. Who in Rome needs Egypt more than Egypt needs Rome? The answer arrived in 48 BC in the form of Julius Caesar. Caesar had just chased his rival Pompey to Alexandria. Pompey was killed before Caesar even landed, presented to him as a gift by the Egyptian court, which thought it would please him. It did not. Caesar was furious. He had wanted the honor of capturing Pompey himself. He arrived in Alexandria, already irritated, already looking for leverage, and already aware that Egypt owed Rome an enormous, unpaid debt from the days of Cleopatra's father. Cleopatra was still in exile, camped at the border with a small army she could barely afford to feed. She could not walk into the palace. Her brother's advisors would have her killed before she reached the door. So she did something that has been romanticized into myth, but underneath the romance was cold, precise calculation. She had herself smuggled into the palace inside a rolled carpet, delivered directly to Caesar's private quarters. What happened next has been told as a seduction. And yes, there was personal chemistry. But focus on what Cleopatra actually brought into that room: information, fluency in 9 languages, including Latin, and an extraordinarily compelling financial argument. She told Caesar, essentially, that Egypt's debt to Rome could be settled in full if Rome helped her reclaim her throne. She wasn't begging, she was negotiating. She was offering Caesar a clean resolution to a messy diplomatic situation, a cooperative trading partner on Rome's southern flank, and a steady supply of Egyptian grain that fed a significant portion of the Roman population. All he had to do was back her. Caesar, one of history's great strategic minds, recognized the offer for what it was. Within weeks, he had used his legions to crush her brother's forces. Cleopatra was restored to the throne of Egypt, and Rome had a loyal, indebted partner sitting on the most fertile agricultural land in the ancient world. She had turned exile into leverage. She had made her debt into a door and walked through it. But Cleopatra was not finished, because Caesar, for all his brilliance, was still one man in one moment. What she was building was something more durable, a position so structurally essential to Rome that no single death could unravel it. When Caesar was assassinated in 44 BC, the entire Western world fractured. Rome split between his allies and his killers. For a lesser ruler, the death of their Roman protector would have meant the end. For Cleopatra, It was an opening. The Roman world eventually consolidated around two men, Octavian in the west and Mark Antony in the east. And Mark Antony needed Egypt far more desperately than Caesar ever had. Antony was planning a massive military campaign against the Parthian Empire, modern-day Iran. It was an ambitious, expensive, and logistically brutal undertaking. He needed grain, he needed ships, he needed money. And there was only one place in the eastern Mediterranean that could supply all three at the scale he required. He summoned Cleopatra to the city of Tarsus in 41 BC to discuss terms. He expected her to arrive as a suppliant, cap in hand, ready to make concessions. She arrived on a golden barge, with silver oars, attended by servants dressed as sea nymphs, with incense burning across the water. The city of Tarsus reportedly emptied its streets to watch her arrive. Mark Antony sat alone on his tribunal because everyone else had gone to the harbor. It was theater, deliberate, expensive, extraordinary theater, and it sent a message that no speech could have delivered. Egypt is not coming to you as a subordinate. Egypt is meeting you as an equal. The negotiations that followed were not about love. They were about terms. Cleopatra agreed to fund Antony's Parthian campaign. In return, Antony would protect Egypt's borders, eliminate her rivals, and formally recognize her children's claim to the territories Rome controlled in the eastern Mediterranean. She was not buying affection, she was buying security, and she was paying for it with the one currency she had in abundance: Egyptian wealth. Over the following years, the alliance deepened. Antony moved his base of operations to Alexandria. He granted Cleopatra and her children control over Cyprus, Crete, and significant portions of the Levant territories that expanded Egypt's wealth and influence dramatically. Rome's Eastern Empire was, in a very real sense, being administered through Egyptian gold. Then came Octavian. Octavian had watched Antony's alliance with Cleopatra with growing unease, not because of the romance, but because of the economics. Antony was redistributing Roman-controlled territory to an Egyptian queen. He was funding his campaigns with Egyptian money rather than Roman taxes. He was, in Octavian's framing, no longer Roman. He had become a foreign king's consort. Octavian declared war not on Antony, but on Cleopatra. That framing was deliberate. It turned a Roman civil war into a patriotic defense against a foreign power, and it worked. In 31 BC, at the Battle of Actium, Octavian's forces defeated the combined fleet of Antony and Cleopatra. The rest collapsed quickly. Antony took his own life. Cleopatra, facing capture and the humiliation of being paraded through Rome in chains, followed him. Egypt became a Roman province. The wealth she had spent decades weaponizing was absorbed into an empire that would use it to fund the next century of expansion. It is easy, in hindsight, to call Cleopatra's story a tragedy. She lost, after all. But here is what the history books rarely say. Loudly enough, she held a collapsing kingdom together for 2 decades against the most powerful empire the Western world had ever seen. She did it not with armies, but with credit, grain, gold, and an almost supernatural ability to make powerful men feel that their success depended on her survival. She understood something that modern finance has only recently given a name to: systemic importance. If you can make yourself indispensable to the system, if the system fails without you, then you are never truly powerless. Banks learned this. Corporations learned this. Cleopatra knew it in 48 BC. The lesson she leaves us is uncomfortable but clear. Wealth alone is not power. Debt alone is not weakness. The real power is in understanding who needs what and positioning yourself at the exact intersection of their need and your supply. Cleopatra did not rule Egypt. She ruled the people who thought they ruled Egypt. And for 20 years, that was enough.